We're coming, and we ain't backing down.
We don't need a bunch of cats in here looking in the mirror.
Everybody just do your job! You understand that?
Hey, will you shut up?
I'm bitterly disappointed with the officiating today.
Guys being dudes.
And they run through our like through a tin horn, man.
Thank you, Lee. Alex Kirshner here with Richard Johnson and our guest this week, Ben Haumiller, the principal game designer for EA Sports College Football 26. Ben, you down to answer some questions directly from the mouths of Split Zone Duo or the keyboards of Split Zone Duo subscribers?
Absolutely, Alex. And to the if the person's listening who happened to see us talking at Burgers Never Say Die a couple of years ago and came up to talk to you and introduce themselves, I was just a random guy who was sitting at the table. Yeah, no, we were having a conversation about the game, so that person didn't even realize that what was going on at the time.
You know what's funny is that I live in Los Angeles now, as I talk about on this podcast sometimes, and I think that is one of maximum 2 or 3 times that I've actually met a listener in Los Angeles. It was more common when I lived in DC, and like whenever we are in like Atlanta for something, I'm always very chuffed because we have a lot of listeners there. But that was like a huge ego moment for me because Ben was under the impression that Los Angeles is just crawling with people coming up to Split Zone Duo hosts all the time.
I mean, the hotbed of SVD is Los Angeles. Yeah, it was great, and that was a great burger as well. Ben, we have a few questions that are sort of at a basic level about the game that I wanted to start with because obviously I think we have a lot of listeners who play this game, and that's why we're doing 2 episodes in a week about the game. I think it's a major cultural event in college football, but a lot of people have not played this game or weren't part of the old generation, or maybe they were a little bit, but aren't very good at it because they didn't play it much, or they're just not very good at video games. I wouldn't say that I am. A subscriber with the screen name Begrudgingly On Here asked, what is the best way, first off, to actually learn to play this game? Like simple stuff like how to time button presses, how to set up playbooks to find plays that you'll actually want to run. It notes that most of the things that this person has found on YouTube, for instance, have not been very helpful. How would you teach someone to play this game if they wanted to give it a shot? This is a really great question, and this is something that we struggle with as developers all the time. Of you have your fans who are, I'm fortunate because of my age. I grew up with these games. I evolved with these games. Every new iteration and new feature just hit me at the right time to where I played them all the way to where I'm just adding on new knowledge to what was already there before. Whereas somebody else that's coming into this brand new they don't have 30 years of knowledge just walking into this door. So I think that's one thing we struggle with as developers of properly explaining some of these nuances and things within the game. And we've also struggled really to be honest, of how do we have the right set of tutorials in the game that people want to play? Because we found that with a lot of sports fans, you kind of get that aggro feel of like, well, I already know everything. I'm already great. Like, I don't need to go to practice. Like, they just want to get in and play games, and then they lose. And then they either get discouraged or they feel the game is broken or cheating them or whatever else.
Buddy, let me tell you, because I cut that shit on and I was like, yo, these interceptions are going crazy.
And so when we have a mistake like that where the interceptions are probably too high, it just compounds that because this person is trying to figure things out and also now just throwing a pick that they probably shouldn't have thrown. And they're just like, okay, cool. Hands up, I'm done. And so that's the worst thing for us. So I think the first thing I would say is, check your ego at the door a little bit. Put that difficulty down. Everyone came in and was like, oh, I played on Heisman back in 14. I'm putting on Heisman right now. And then got served.
Yeah,
so
man.
like, okay.
Outside is different these days, man.
Right.
You ain't ready for outside.
And the game has changed a lot since that old one. So even if you did play the old one, there is a learning curve to catch up with where things are. So lower that difficulty a little bit to give yourself a chance to feel things out. Play some better teams versus some worse teams to give yourself some success. Don't be afraid to go into practice and just tinker. That's one of my favorite things in practice is you've got random offense, random defensive play. Just sit there and just do that over and over again. And you'll start, you have no real, and maybe even the same offensive play versus a random defense. So you can start to recognize the patterns of seeing, what shell they're in and kind of determining what you can do. And that will help you in the course when you're playing the game. But yeah, I mean, those are the biggest things is to go in there and get some reps, especially at a lower difficulty level. That will help you. But it's funny because the number one thing I was going to say was just go online and start looking. There are so many people out there creating content with tips and tricks and things. The tough part is like you're watching them do that and you're trying to match what they're doing. And some of these things are very advanced to be able to pull off.
It's like video game body image.
And so, yeah, it's like anything else, right? How do you get to Carnegie Hall? You practice. So go in there and get your reps and get in the lab and try and do things and experience different things too. Like that's one thing I love about this game is there's 136 schools in it now that are all unique in different ways, shapes, and forms. And so specifically with like playbooks, for example, we did a ton of work this year. So like when you get the game this year, fire up Penn State, even if you're not a Penn State fan, and check out that playbook and all the motion and shifts and everything that we've added there that we've never had before. Really helps to try and tag what that school is all about. But also too, like me, I'm excited to play with Rice in my dynasty this year, my first one, because I'm going to run the triple at a non-academy and not do it in a weird way where I'm trying to force something that's not actually there. That's what they're running. I can take over and run their actual offense. So, I think that's the piece I would say is just don't get discouraged. Also too, if you're having trouble, don't go online. It's rough out there on the streets. Man. These kids are good. I've retired from online play because, man, you imagine getting, it's bad enough. Everyone thinks I should beat them by 100. So if any game where I, don't beat them by 100 or lose, oh man, I never hear the end of it. So yeah, I've retired from that competitive game world. And if you're not a huge gamer or big up on the current game, play against the CPU, kind of get your feet wet that way, and then progress up to actually, meeting some people online and playing them that way. Because man, it can get rough quickly.
Ian asked where tutorials will kind of live in this game and to what extent they'll be, I think, part of Ultimate Team where they were last year. Like, how did you think through where to sort of try to handhold me as I'm going through it?
Yeah, that was one thing I think the biggest fault of the game last year. And there were a lot of faults of the game last year. And nothing's ever perfect, but we didn't explain a lot of things. And part of that, again, was we wanted the discovery. I think that's something that's missing a lot in modern games is the discovery. We're so afraid that people are going to hit a wall or hit some sort of frustration and just turn out and leave that they won't actually try and punch through it to figure out something for themselves. And we in our head around that sometimes. And we say, well, we got to make it so easy. But then you make it so easy that there's no challenge, there's no thought. You're just pressing a button and getting a reward. And I don't want to live in that world. None of us do. So we did not tutorialize everything last year. Sometimes to a credit, sometimes to a fault. Again, like we talk about, there's 50 different ultimate ways to recruit in college football because there's no one specific way.
Yeah.
But something like the sway mechanic, for example, when you're recruiting, we didn't explain that very well at all. So you didn't know when to use it, how to use it, or if it was successful. That was a miss on us. So now we've gone back and added those pieces organically in there. So when you're doing the sway, it doesn't have this big pop-ups, where the screen, goes black and it kind of points to those pieces. We didn't go that overt with tutorials, but we tried to make it more organic in there. So you understand the mechanics you're using while you're using them. You will see some pop up during gameplay that tell you things like how to use the option and how to run that. But that's a piece that we are trying to continue at getting better at is tutorializing the game. We did lean a lot on the community this year to help with a lot of those pieces. And that's a great resource to use is go to YouTube and fire up and find some of these creators that are making this content that they're going to tell you how to do these things. But we need to do better ourselves about making sure that people understand what they're doing and how to do it. And so that's an evolutionary process for us. It's kind of a peek behind the curtain there. Like we're not fans of those scrims where it just blacks out and just points to something when you first come into a screen, because what we see is the same thing we experience with it is you're so excited and kind of new and coming into this for the first time that you're not thinking about those tutorial pieces. You just button through it. And then you're just like, well, I don't know how to use this. Like, well, yeah, because you just button through everything that was going to tell you how to use it. But that's, so it's how do we find a unique and kind of organic way to tutorialize things while you're playing that you feel like you understand what you're doing. You're not being like, fully handheld. We want you to feel that like discovery, but we also don't want you to just be walking through a dark room. Like we got to shine some lights on things for you to show you where certain things are.
Kevin asks, I don't know if this is still open, but I'd love to hear more about the conversations they have with recruiting staffs. You guys have with recruiting staffs. One thing they did last year was make recruiting at Notre Dame easier than it was at ECU. I'm interested what they're doing about the house settlement, if anything.
That is an interesting one. The house settlement and how that comes into the game and how that changes things for us. We took a very cautious approach in year one because we were just unsure of what the landscape was going to be. And again, like we were saying before,
Yeah.
but like we were talking about before, right? Anything you do means something else isn't getting done. And so did we want to rush in and make this whole, NIL piece, not really knowing how it's going to shake out, but basically knowing that whatever we do, we're probably going to be wrong and have to rechange it later. And so that's, something we didn't do for the first year, gets cut because of if we went after the NIL piece. And then in the second year, it would be something that didn't get done because we had to correct the mistake from the first year. So we took a cautious, optimistic approach of how it's going to all shake out. House just settled very recently. We've all watched that. We're going to see how the courts aren't done yet, right? Lawyers' billable hours are undefeated, right? So we're going to have some challenges here. We've already seen a couple of them pop up. So, but we can't just sit and wait for everything, for all the dust to settle, or else we'll never move. So, recruiting and the NIL aspect is pretty much the same this year as it was last year because of the timing of everything, right? The house stuff just happened very recently. We're already locking in plans for this next year's game. So, we weren't able to pivot that as quickly to be able to make something fundamental there that made sense. And also, too, was what gamers wanted to play with this. Because, we all, I think, are very adamant that we don't want to turn this into just full free agency where you're managing do I want to pay this guy 1.3 million or 1.4 million? Like, that just feels like that's beyond the pale for what folks want to do. But I think you're right.
It's a funny thing because this is one of the areas where I'm not sure I want the game to be completely realistic. Like, I think that recruiting in sort of a gamified, old schoolish way with some nods to NIL, I think am I right that the brand feature is sort of an NIL adjacent thing?
That is our approach for this year. Yeah, Road to Glory is a little different. You can sign NIL deals because you're the player and they're coming from the brand themselves.
Yeah, but that never did it for me.
Coach.
I think I like the way that you do it in Dynasty because I've had this problem in all kinds of video games. I've done this in like the F1 game, which I know is under the EA umbrella now. It's like you can get a nicer apartment or something, or have nicer stuff like that doesn't even help you in the game, but it's just like good to be rich. It's like it's a video game. Like I don't care if I'm rich.
Right. That's been the struggle, right, for us too. And some games are able to do that in a way that makes sense for them. But for us, like, you're not going to go out and hire a personal trainer to get a better stats or better ratings in our game. Because if you did that in the real world, the coach would be like, cool, you're no longer in my program. Like, we have a staff for that. You're supposed to be doing it my way. So, we have to be thoughtful of building these things in both that make context, that make sense in context for the world that you're building, but also, too, are what your players want to experience. And so, we know we are not where we need to be yet for that. We have some good thoughts about how we're going to get there. But we also know what we don't want to do, which is just straight up like, oh, cool, it's just the money button, and that's all it is. And because, you look at it, there is an aspect of that, and we can't ignore that. But your program is still your program. Kids are coming there because of your chance of getting into the NFL. You're developing them, like their chance to win a championship. Those things still matter. So we're never going to just like, okay, throw all those away. It's now just what's your budget. But we can't ignore that. And I think one thing you're going to see this year, and we talked about a little bit of the costs for visits being different if they're local or not. That was really trying to help show that differentiation of programs where your big schools have the budget. They can go across the country and grab talent. Your smaller schools need to try and stay more local. You're going to see us do more things like that to really try and differentiate programs from the haves and the have-nots. As long as we're still in this world where we pretend that 136 are all playing the same game, we're going to try and build that same world where you can have that and then go through. But we'll shift as the world shifts and change. But that's kind of our approach right now. We've been cautiously optimistic about how we're going to handle it. And we're hearing the pressure internally, too, of like, okay, guys, like, year two, and we still don't have the meaningful NIL story that we want to tell in there yet. When's it going to happen? And so we're going to start making some pushes here, not for this year, but very soon to be able to tell that story.
This is a question that I actually really like. Are there any plans for players to be able to add additional conferences in custom conferences rather than just being able to edit current ones? I want to cap conferences at 12 as God intended, but we can't do that in 25 without having a ton of independence. That question comes from Steve.
Yeah, custom conferences, that's a feature I absolutely adore just because what it can do for your experience. That, if you want to see what the future of college football likes, go ahead and set that up. If you want to go back in time, set that up. You just want to make whatever you want to make, go ahead. But it is all user driven at this moment. And so that's something we want to talk about. Back in the PS2 days, we did have auto invites and demotion, but it was also a 1-for-1 switch. There was not a growing concept or a shrinking concept of conferences. That's a technical challenge that we have not been able to take on yet. I talk about this too. I was just talking the other day about back when the Texans came in like 2000, I think it was Madden 02. You got to year 2 of your franchise, and all of a sudden you can do an expansion draft and add this new team in, and it just changed your perception of playing the game. You saw that with NHL a couple of years ago when Vegas came in. You could have an expansion there. it's a technical challenge to grow and shrink the league. And so that's been one of the things that we have never really gone after. And that's why when you play with Team Builder, you've got to remove an FPS to be able to add one, because we do stay at 136 all the time. But it is a thought of what we want to do in the future. So it's something that we've talked about. We just haven't got there yet. And same thing with the conference piece. Like, you can only take a conference down to 0 if they're not even a conference, independence, right? You can go independence down to 0, but we don't let you dissolve a conference. Again, that's with our partners. We don't want to say, hey, sorry, Sunbelt, you're a great partner to us, but people are just kind of removing you from the world. And I know that's a bad example because Sunbelt's doing really well right now, but you know what I mean? Like, we don't
put it past. Do not put it past our friends in Birmingham. Do not put it past our friends in Birmingham.
Yeah. Ben, well, I'll continue with kind of the wish listy portion of what people are asking for, because I feel like even when you don't have them, you give good answers about why and whether it's the kind of thing you can think about in the future. Antonio asked if for rivalries like UCLA and USC, can we get the game to automatically match home and home uniforms? So it's blue versus red.
You people
in
are
online
sick.
play. That's
I love it.
That is
people are sick.
People are kind of sick, but so are the devs. Like, the devs have the civil conflict between UCF and UConn in this game.
I got a funny story about that real quick before we go with the color matchups. With the trophy room being added back this year and having that trophy case, you can actually store off everything that you've won throughout your dynasty. We had to get imagery of all these coaches, all these trophies that we didn't have. And some we had from the old game we were able to repurpose, but like the civil conflict, we didn't have any good imagery to use of that. We've got a lot of UCF alums that are here. We're based out of Orlando, so it's kind of right there. So one of the guys reached out, and they brought the trophy to the office, and we were able to take photos of it. So that's the image that you see in there is the legit trophy that we got from UCF because they brought it over. So
UCF is playing ball with this now in a way that they were not back in the days of Bob Diaco, when they were not interested.
A guy had it in his office up in the corner, and he's like, I'll bring that over. It was hilarious.
That's good.
And so going back to the USC UCLA thing, you can set that up to be able to have color on color. It wasn't there by default. It's funny, I'm spacing right now. Did we get that or not for this year? So I apologize. I don't have the answer at the top of my head. But that is something that, like, to your point there, Richard, like, it's kind of a sickos thing, but also too, if you know, right? And you jump into that game and you see the away team in white, you're just like, well, that feels off. Like, you expect to see that the powder blue and the and the red for USC, and it wasn't there. And so that's something that, like, and again, I apologize for not having that off the top of my head. I'll have to go back and look. But if it's not there, it's something that we can do. It's just a matter of getting it in the pipeline to get it done.
Hey, we lightning rounded you. You can't have everything on the top of your head. I'll continue with the wish listy portion of this as well. Zach A asked, has the kicking improved? And then in parentheses says, gotten easier.
Yeah. But inquiring minds would love to know.
This was such a point of contention last year because on one hand, college kickers. On the other hand, it's hard enough to get people to kick in a game anyway. Like, now you're going to make them even want to do it less. But it was one of those things too. You saw the fun aspect of that, of like that meter just going crazy, and you're just like, oh God, I've got no chance in getting this one. So we did make some refinements and things. There are also coaching skills you can get in Dynasty that were going to help make things a little easier for your kicker and calm them down a little bit and give them a little ratings boost, things like that. But no, kicking is still going to be a challenge. We don't want to make it a layup. I think that's one thing we saw back in Madden. We went to the right stick and you could just go down and up. It just became kind of automatic, right? It just felt like it was just too easy. Some may say the pendulum swung a little too far the other way. But we are also trying to make that college game and college kickers, and that is kind of a portion of it. So it still will be a challenge, but it should not be like you are just fighting for your life every time you try and kick an extra point. It's not going to be crazy.